Allyship. Before I introduce our presenter, Thomas Barnette, today, I'd like to ask you to, if you have questions, put it in the chat and we will respond to it at the end of the presentation. We want to make sure we get through the presentation. And I also want to let you know that we will send the video and slides of the presentation after the webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce Thomas Barnette. He has over 28 years of experience as a facilitator, trainer, coach, mentor, keynote speaker in every sector of business, both public and private. Thomas's mission is to impact and transform thoughts, behavior, and lives. He has a degree in industrial engineering from Georgia Tech, and throughout his career, he's held positions of executive leadership, which include human resources, organizational development, operations, sales, and marketing. I've had the pleasure to hear Thomas several times, and I can tell you you're in for a treat. So Thomas, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you, Work Institute, for having me today. Today's talk is about what it means to be an ally at work and how being an ally allows us to create more inclusion at work. I'm sure we've all at some point been told or reminded to stay out of other people's business or stay in our own lanes, avoid drama at all costs. Anything that keeps us in our own worlds, but it also creates fewer opportunities to address difficult issues. However, the world we live in, past and present, with so many issues, not only in this country, but around the world, is demanding our attention and our participation. These are some interesting times. We're dealing with several pandemics, a health pandemic, a financial pandemic, an injustice pandemic. And no matter where you are in the world, something is happening. So no longer can we sit by and let others do the hard work for us. We're being forced to take a closer look at who we are and who we want to become. So those of us who are blessed or lucky enough to have employment with an opportunity to continue to learn and to grow and to expand our abilities, especially around our engagement with others, we're pretty blessed. So it takes an understanding of others and getting to know them beyond the surface, which then allows us to better be champions for each other in the workplace. And will then continually stretch forward the actions of inclusion in the work environment. Once we get to know one another better, then we can address each other's struggles and challenges and the issues we find difficult to manage either individually or sometimes as an underrepresented group at work. I always like to say this: inclusion starts with I, the letter I, but it also means me. I am a solution for inclusion, and so are you. We all have a role and a responsibility to play when it comes to creating a consciously inclusive environment at work. And one aspect of doing that is through being an ally. All right. So the agenda for today, I want us to create an understanding of what it means to be an ally in the workplace, understand who needs allies. Who is it? And what is that? Where does it create the opportunity for us to step in? What are some different types of allies and different roles that we can play if we want to be an ally? And then make sure that we have an understanding as to why allyship is important for conscious inclusion at work. So here's the definition I want to give to you in terms of workplace allies. Workplace allies are willing to personally align themselves with colleagues to make sure they're heard and included. An ally is continuously standing up for others to create a positive and inclusive environment for all. So thinking about that word continuously, it may seem daunting and as if you're always on the lookout for something to happen. And I don't like to think of it that way. But what I do like to say is it's raising your antenna up a bit so that you can notice things that might create exclusion. And then so you can actually make a difference. Workplace culture, it can't change overnight. And even if your workplace is generally inclusive, employees may still be marginalized within their industries at large or even outside of the workplace, because being an ally doesn't just stop at work. We're talking about work today, but it doesn't stop with just work. And all of those ally positions can help nurture growth or hurt growth if we're not stepping in. Real progress requires individuals deciding that they personally want to do something to fight back against discrimination. It takes people who want to move from their seat in the audience to take a leading role in the effort for us to all feel included. I want to talk about the fact that allies aren't here to rush in and be the knight in shining armor riding in on a white horse. They are to listen. They're there to support, and they are there to have important conversations for the purpose of understanding. Allies can help create a safe space for us to get to know one another better. That's one of the keys that I have here, creating that safe space to know and understand others. And then as an ally, you can also help break through those barriers of engagement. What gets in the way sometimes when we're not able to connect with people? And allies are really doing the work to try and break through those barriers. And then allies empower others to do their best work. This is where we thrive. You create that safe space for people to bring their whole selves to work, and then you give them an opportunity through that leveraging of diversity and understanding and allyship to do their best work. So we all have to commit to increasing our self-awareness, our social competence. We know this is part of emotional intelligence, and then build that muscle memory to recognize those exclusive behaviors, take actions to mitigate them for ourselves, and when we witness it from other people. And the good news is once you understand and you see it, once you become an ally, you can't undo it. Once you see bias, you can't unsee it. That's the good news. So the same thing goes for acting as an ally. Once you start practicing being an ally, you'll keep practicing. That desire within us, that essence of who we are to connect with people and bring the best out of each other, that part will kick in. And some of you, I would imagine, are probably already doing that now. So, all right, thank you. All right, so what does it take, what it takes to be an ally? These are four components that I have come up with in terms of teaching this material over a number of years, and especially in the last 6 months. So first, it takes empathy. Empathy creates understanding. Empathy is mind to mind, giving us a mental sense of how another person's thinking, how it works. And this is important. I want to make it clear that empathy is not a form of weakness, right? This is where we start to form our ability to be an ally. This not only requires emotional intelligence, but it also is a reference to our life experiences and our background. Um, sometimes it may feel like it's difficult to empathize with every situation, but sometimes we have to reach into the experiences that we know other people have had, have conversations to find an understanding around empathy. One of my teachers said, empathy weaves the fabric of who we are without changing who we are. So that helps us to connect to something greater. And then compassion. Compassion facilitates change. This is what motivates us to help those who may be experiencing difficulties at work or even in their lives. And then empowerment. It takes empowerment. This is where we start to reveal the value in others and helps them to foster a sense of their true self as powerful, confident, capable, and worthy people. If you have empathy and compassion, and from your own sense of power or privilege, you will need the last part, emotional courage, to take the next steps. That is where we do the right thing. Standing up when you see or hear exclusion and microaggressions in the workplace. This is where the rubber meets the pavement, our conscious choice to do something. And it takes emotional courage to do that. So those four aspects of what are what I consider the things that it takes for us to be an ally. So how to be an ally at work? There are two categories that I see allies falling into. Those with a position of power, with privilege or influence. And oftentimes when we hear allyship, that's what we think of. But it also can be peer to peer. Using your privilege to help others at work is wonderful. If you don't have privilege or if you don't think that you have power, we still have influence with other people that we work with. And how we treat other people sometimes is a reflection of leadership. What leadership does, sometimes we follow, we emulate that. So it can also be peer to peer where exclusion can happen or allyship can happen. So that's one of the reasons why I always say it doesn't always have to be from a position of power. We know that those are the positions that create more opportunities, but peer to peer matters as well. So as we continue to think about roles that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, I want us to think about an exclusionary experience that maybe we've all had. This is to help us understand who needs allies. So anyone who has ever felt excluded or marginalized probably needed an ally. All of us probably at some type have probably had some type of exclusionary experience and could have used someone to help support us, or we could have supported someone else. In a broader sense, we know that this is true. But in a more focused sense, we know that women and underrepresented minority groups at work tend to experience exclusion the most. Especially with everything that's happening in the world right now, we have to raise our antenna up a bit, as I mentioned earlier, to realize that folks need allies. So I want you to think back to a time when you experienced exclusion. Even if you were younger and you were that young person who wasn't picked for a team, maybe you were the last one picked all the time, if you were even picked at all. Or maybe you're the subject matter expert and you're not invited to the meeting. Maybe you are really smart and people called you names, or maybe your department only engages with each other and you find it difficult to connect with people outside of your own area, outside of your own department. Maybe your boss or someone that you works with they've made sly remarks about your writing style or your communication style. I know I've had people talk about the way that I speak. I'm from Middle Georgia, from the South, and I've worked really hard to make sure that sometimes my Southern accent doesn't completely take over, but it's there. So I always want people to realize that sometimes being made fun of in that way can make you feel like you're excluded. This is one that I always talk about. Maybe a coworker avoids you or doesn't look you in the eye when they talk to you. Maybe they just tolerate you, or vice versa. Maybe that's something that we may do. We may not think of it consciously. It may just be something that we inside with another person, we haven't formed that connection. All of these are ways that maybe you've experienced exclusion or someone else. And then I want you to think about, how did it feel? Or how does it feel? Maybe it's happening right now. Maybe in the virtual setting, the work from home that we've been experiencing, had some exclusionary experiences that have made you feel a certain way. So I want you to tap into those feelings. And then I want you to think about the impact that it has on you, your ability to do your best, to contribute, to thrive, or the impact that it may have on other people. If they're not showing up or you're not showing up, what does that look like? What impact does that have on you and your ability to do your best work? So I want you to consider that as we go through these. I also want you to think about how it would feel if someone had stepped in and validated what you went through, or if that happened now, what that might do for you. Also consider what keeps people from standing up to be allies, even if the moment has passed. Maybe we don't feel like we have the power to do so. Maybe we're afraid of repercussions. Maybe we just don't know what to say. But one of the things in terms of talking in the other classes, when we have more time, we actually spend time, and I'm giving you this information because this is what fosters the understanding of that we all can use an ally, even depending on our own exclusionary experience and what that looked like. And having those conversations with each other is the actual activity that we use. And then people talk about what it would have felt like for someone to validate them, how they could actually step in and support people. And I'm going to give you some roles now that you can play to help mitigate some of these exclusionary experiences as allies. allies. So consider it for now. I'm going to give you some roles to help you understand what role you could play and what you could possibly do. All right, thank you, Mary. So types of allies, we have the sponsor, the champion, the amplifier, the advocate, the scholar, the upstander, and the confidant. So we're going to go through all of these, I promise, all right? So let's start with the sponsor. So the sponsor recognizes and actively promotes the expertise of others. So from performance reviews to opportunities to help people grow and expand their abilities, a sponsor can really help direct a career on an upward mobility track, and especially for people in underrepresented groups. So you have to remember to look outside of your own group, meaning people who are like you, if you want to be an ally as a sponsor. Now, I know talent is talent, doesn't matter. But if your bias for someone who is like you, if you have a bias for someone who is like you, then there's a possibility that you're missing others for for you to be an ally to with regards to sponsoring them. Also creates room for people with subject matter expertise to answer questions instead of answering it themselves. This is a bit more than just being a sponsor, which can focus on the individual, as I mentioned earlier. This is looking at more public events, such as a panel. If you're going to have a panel discussion, well, who's on the panel? Well, if it's all men, then that's a problem, even if it's a mixture of races of men. But if it's all men, that probably is a problem. Or if you have a list of keynote speakers and there's no diversity among the keynote speakers. So they're looking for these more public opportunities to ensure that other groups are being represented through being a champion. Then you have the amplifier. The amplifier helps to ensure those at the table, so you're in the room, but that you have an active voice that is heard and valued. So they focus on communication. I always like to talk about the good old boy networks and meetings where people come in and they're slapping each other on the back. Maybe they're talking about sports. And then there's those people who are in these meetings that are smiling and nodding, but they're not necessarily contributing. What sets the tone for that? Are we making sure everyone else feels comfortable in that space to share their ideas, their creativity, their ability to be innovative. So we want to make sure that there are guidelines that we follow. The amplifier is the person looking out for that. How do we create that space so that everybody feels comfortable in that setting to be able to contribute? Because if you're in the room, if you're at the table, then you deserve to be there. So that means your voice deserves to be heard. I remember when I first started working in the corporate world and I was 21 years old, graduated from Georgia Tech, sitting in a room with these other managers and directors. And it wasn't that I didn't know what I wanted to say, but the mood in 1990, 1991 was definitely a different kind of mood. And so oftentimes I would be quiet. And my boss came up to me and he said, "Why are you so quiet in the meetings?" And I said, "I feel uncomfortable with the way that the meetings are held." And that really happened. So I was that little black kid, not shy and quiet, but not feeling as if I could contribute in that moment. And my boss served as an amplifier for me. He helped open the way for us to be more mindful and respectful of other people in the room who may not always be comfortable with the tone and the mood. So that's what an amplifier does. Then we have the advocate. The advocate recognizes when all perspectives are not present and creates opportunities for those perspectives to be at the table. They can look at events and key meetings and see who's missing. So again, this is a little bit different than the champion who is on the lookout for major public events to increase inclusion. The advocate is looking at more exclusive, closed door meetings or events where representation may be lacking. Think about ad campaigns where the ad offended a group of people and the people making the decision just didn't know it. Research has shown that those high-powered mistakes occurred because everyone in the room only saw one perspective. And those mistakes are costly, especially in today's global economy. And with the societal issues that we have going on around the world, we simply can't make those mistakes, right? And it's still happening. So the advocate looks at the room and ensures that there is representation from marginalized groups and that those perspectives are shared. Remember to consider your span of power and influence as we think about these roles. Where do you have the ability to fit into some of these roles? And one of the things I want to mention is this: as we're approaching Halloween, and I mean it only from the sense of an example. Megyn Kelly, when the issue of painting faces and those, and last year when all of this happened, when it occurred, or a couple of years ago when it happened, and she ended up losing her job, it was because the people in the room didn't understand the perspective of people outside the room where it could have been offensive. And that was a huge mistake. She apologized for it, but unfortunately, it didn't go over. So those are the kinds of things that an advocate can help prevent. And then we have the scholar. I love this one because it's about self-education. It's about awareness and knowledge. Someone who is always learning and doing their own research and their own work to understand marginalized groups. This is someone who seeks to understand the challenges of others. They're looking to understand what are some of the issues that these groups out the groups outside of themselves, what are they facing? We know there's so much about minority groups that history doesn't always teach us. And so this is where we can start to bridge that gap between what limited information we've been taught about each other and where we can be a change agent within ourselves and learn more, to know more. The struggles of others and the perspective of those who have had to carry the burdens of just kind of being yourself is real. And I've had that as well. And if you've never lived it, you just don't understand it. So it's reading all kinds of different materials, having conversations with people, maybe going to attending employee resource groups meetings outside of your own group to understand more. I will say that if that's something that you want to do, it is very much encouraged. Get the permission of the group first and before you show up so that they can be aware that you're coming and that they can still have the kind of discussion that they want. But it's for education, and people are welcomed for you to be allies. The LGBT community is always looking for people to be allies. LGBTQ community is always looking for people to be allies, and you have to do it from a place of positive intent, from a place of authenticity and integrity, so that it doesn't feel like people are being compromised. So it doesn't matter. Look outside of yourself, other employee resource groups, or other groups to be able to look and say, what more can I learn? The more you know, the more you're going to be able to help people. So the scholar does that. And then we have the upstander. This is a person who stands up against wrongdoings and acts to combat them. They see something, say something, and do something. This one is also a person who's very, very active. The upstander always speaks up if they witness behavior that is offensive. They shut down those off-topic comments that could alienate or harass other people. People in privileged positions have the ability to call out unacceptable behavior towards marginalized people and be heard. So remember that. Underrepresented people may not be comfortable raising these issues due to a fear of backlash or jeopardizing their professional relationships. When you do speak up, explain why you pointed it out. Why did you bring it up? That's always important. You're going to nip those microaggressions and those explicit biases or even unconscious biases, nip them in the bud. That's what an upstander will do. Comments about a person's size or their sexual orientation, maybe their weight, their hair, the clothes that they wear, their communication style. This is what the upstander is trying to make sure that they can stop those before they snowball into major problems. Again, you don't have to be a person in a position of power to be an upstander. You can be a person who has the emotional courage to do it. You do have to say within yourself, this isn't right, so I'm going to say something. It's how you say it that matters the most. But you don't have to be in a position of power to say something when you see something. So everyone can be an upstander. And then we have the confidant. someone who supports, validates, and creates a safe space for those in underrepresented groups to express themselves without fear or repercussion. Their job is to listen. And this is something everyone can do as well. Leaders, mentors, peer to peer, you can be a confidant, creating that safe space for people to share. And as leaders, having an open door policy where all are welcomed. This is vital if you are a confidant to be fair with all employees. It's also important not to assume something couldn't happen just because you haven't experienced it. The confidant will listen, ask questions, and when someone describes an experience that they've had, it's important to not jump in with your own personal stories. You're there to listen and support. Don't overshadow someone else's experience with your own if they're coming to you. You want to show empathy, but don't take over. That's really important. If you're a manager, hold regular touch base meetings with your team and take the temperature to find out what's going on with people. It's important to believe someone when they share exclusion with you that you did not witness because it's their perspective that matters. All right. So those are the roles. Think about where you have power, privilege, influence, peer to peer, and you'll get these slides and you can think about these roles again and how you can step in to be an ally for people who need it. Allyship in action. So you want to notice exclusionary behavior. Notice when something has happened, raising your antenna up a bit. Then you want to make sure that you clarify and validate that experience with a person. I want to say this too. You can be an ally for the person who created, I'm sorry, for the person who experienced the exclusion and for the person or the individual, I'm sorry, the event individual or the group that created the exclusion. So an ally can be on both ends of it. You can be an ally to the group that is feeling left out or to the group creating that feeling of someone else being left out. So it's just a matter of which lane do you want to pick and where do you feel comfortable stepping in an ally as an ally. Sometimes I've done both because it's important for all perspectives to be understood when you're trying to get people to understand allyship. So stopping and listening, being engaged, make sure that you practice your listening skills and be a change agent. This is where you have an opportunity to really make great strides within yourself and with others. So use your position to step in and say, we can do better. And then you want to work together to problem solve. How you problem solve in one situation may be different the next time. As an ally, no two people and no two experiences are exactly the same. So remember, what worked one time may not work again. That's where you're listening. That's where you're understanding through conversation and asking those questions. What is it that the person needs beyond just your support if they want to solve the problem right now or not? Because people have to feel comfortable. But that support is immeasurable. That's what you're offering. If you don't feel like you have power, but you want to offer support, that is better than letting these exclusive behaviors go unclarified and validated. So that support is wonderful. And then again, emotional courage, doing the right thing. This is important for an ally to always have. Choosing the role that best fits you and at the end of the day saying where can I make the biggest difference as an ally. That's what you want to do in order to put the role of an ally into action. That emotional courage is important. So an ally is always learning. They're always having a growth mindset. They're always checking their biases. They're connecting with other employee resource groups or organizations outside of their own. Practice makes us better. That's how we become better as allies. Continuously stand up to be an advocate. And guess what? We're not perfect. Practice makes us better. It doesn't make us perfect. So, as an ally, be okay with making mistakes. It's better that you try to be an ally and support rather than not support at all. And so, from that place, be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's where you grow. Inclusion puts the concept and practice of of diversity into action by creating an environment of respect and connection. It's the how. And an ally is creating conscious inclusion by being the person who is standing up and being available for people to bring their whole and best selves to work. So from that place, I think we're good. Mary, I'm ready for questions.
Okay.
Yes.
What questions do you have? William, do we have some questions in the chat box?
We do not. No, there are none there. Besides a worry that some barking dogs may be annoying everyone, but no.
Okay.
We're on mute so everyone's safe. Okay, here's one. For leaders in an organization, how do they promote allyship?
Thank you for asking that question. Continued D&I training, unconscious bias training, that is one of the best ways to get your other leaders. When you include allyship as a part of your D&I initiatives, that is where you start to teach people this material, because it is an important part of it. And it's one of the best ways to create conscious inclusion at work. So put as part of your D&I initiatives, it's really important to include allyship. We're noticing that it is the easiest way for people who may not feel like they have a place of power to be allies, but especially for those people who know they have a place of power and privilege. So continued work, the D&I work is important. Looking at your recruiting efforts as well to leverage diversity, ensure that the people that you're bringing in are diverse so that you do put allyship into action is also a part of it. You flatline your ability to do your best to actually have more engagement if you have a lot of ideas around it when you're not really doing the work around it. So you have to include allyship as part of your D&I initiatives.
Thomas, we got another one.
Okay.
Similarly to the previous one, how do we get other leaders at the company on board with allyship?
Yeah, so expanding upon what I said, it starts from the top down. And to be honest with you, that's where you have to speak to someone who is connected to HR and talk to them about this tool to be used is the best way for people to start creating a culture of inclusion. When you are stepping up for other people, when you are supporting each other, when exclusive behaviors happen, that can only happen by being aware and practicing. So you're going to have to get your diversity. If you have a D&I council at work, or if you have your HR team who is responsible for D&I, they are going to have to start including allyship as a way of teaching people, especially leaders, and also just employees, their responsibility in creating this culture of inclusion. So I would say if you have a relationship with people in HR, or if you have a D&I council, to bring this up to them, because that is where you get the leaders involved. Definitely leaders probably have the most opportunity to create more gateways for people through allyship, but it doesn't just stop with them. So that's what I would say. If you have a relationship, have a conversation. And I'm sure Work Institute would be more than happy to maybe speak to some of these organizations as well around what can be offered around more training with allyship. Would that be correct, Mary?
That would.
Thanks. We got another question. A good question here. Thomas, can you provide any suggestions about how an ally in a lower position in an organization can confront higher level individuals when they engage in exclusionary behavior?
Mm-hmm. It's a tough one, right? I mentioned earlier, you have to feel that emotional courage within yourself to step up and say something. I'll say it from my perspective. I've been in that same situation. And the rapport that you have with someone that you trust, that is where you can build an opportunity to engage in a conversation, even if it's not the person who's creating it. If there's anyone in leadership that you trust, That's who you want to start with, because it is going to take someone from that level for you to even feel comfortable bringing it up, right? Um, so that's where I started. That is what I did. I went to someone else, and and it was actually the HR assistant, and we talked about what I felt was exclusion from upper management. And even though I was a supervisor, I still didn't. I still wanted it to be a safe conversation for me. So you're going to have to find someone that you trust. That's where it starts. And then you have to have that conversation of what that exclusion is. Be specific, give specific information. When did it happen? Who did it affect? That story that I told you to think about, what was the exclusion? What did it feel like? Who did it impact? All of that is what you want to share. And we can hope from that place that if they are sincere with their attempts to create more inclusion, that from there, you don't have to point a person out, but you can create trainings and awareness around behavior and get everybody on board. Like I said earlier, it doesn't happen overnight. We wish it did. We are in a position right now where it needs to be happening, but it still doesn't happen overnight. One thing that my mother always said was, lead with your heart and your mind will follow. Well, lead with your heart, speak to someone on a level that you feel comfortable, share with them what you are feeling, and make sure that you can work together to figure out what can be done to get that message across to those people creating that exclusion. You got to trust somebody somewhere. That's the hard thing, but you have to.
Great, thank you. Looks like that's about all the questions we have.
Okay.
So unless another one pops up here, I think we're about wrapped up here.
Well, I want to say this, it's a continual journey of building and expanding and growing your mindset, to gain more knowledge, to stretch yourself and to stretch other people. It's not easy, but it is something that takes time. It is going to take time in order for that to happen. 2020 has been interesting for all of us. It's been a heck of a year. It's been isolating. We've had challenges. And, corporate organizations are really, at this point, in charities, communities, want to do better. They want to do better. So now we have to push in order for that better to happen. We know it, but we've got to take the actions so that we can actually get the results that we want. And it's not going to happen if we just think about it. Being an ally, creating inclusion is not a spectator standby sport. It is something that we have to actively get involved in. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to say that, because if we don't, then we're going to miss an opportunity right now where we have so much awareness to create more inclusive work environments. And now's the time to do it. It really is.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I know that everyone has found this to be really helpful and good advice. And we just appreciate you being our presenter.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Work Institute. Thank you, William, for all of your help as well. I have enjoyed my time with you all today. I hope that there's some good information that you can take away with you and continue the journey of being an ally and creating an inclusive work environment where all people feel like they can thrive and be their best self at work.
Hey, Thomas, we do have one more question.
Okay, great.
And so how would an ally speak up about racial injustice and allyship with their coworkers without them automatically disregarding it as a political preference?
Well, that's not easy. And you're not, you know what? Here's the thing here's the truth. You're not going to be able to reach every person. You're not. There's always a way, and I said this to Mary earlier, there's a way to engage in conversation. It's about awareness, and it's about sharing the truth of who we are and what we go through so that people can understand. But not everybody's going to get on that train and go with you. But those people who are willing to listen, that is where you start. So you can't force people to be a part of the solution. You can't force people to want to be a part of the journey to be better. But for those people, what I have found is if I don't say something, then I reach no one. So it's better to say something and reach one person. And if that's one person, that's better than nothing. So that's what I would say. You can't change those minds that aren't willing to change.
Great, great. Well, once again, thank you very much, Thomas. You kind of closed down a little bit there before our last question. And now, of course, we get another question coming in. Okay, no, we are good. So Thomas, if you have anything else you'd like to add on, please feel free now. Otherwise, I'd like to say that we're going to get the slides and the recording to everyone who's registered. So be expecting that in your email inbox with the email address you registered with, and we'll get that to you this week.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I really enjoyed my time, and I hope everybody is safe. And stay safe. We are all in this together, and just keep working to be the best that you can be.